What's up guys, Decaf again with Pandemic's newest kill. Yay! Well, this time we took down Conclave of Wind, and this also marks the very first video that you get to see me in my new goblin form. Well, as I said in the Valiona kill, it's, kind of nice to look at something that's not the exact same character you've been staring at for 6 years. So, it's quite a change, changing from the largest character model on the horde down to the smallest, but it's interesting. It gives me something new to look at, and I might add that the totems for the goblin kick the ever-living crap out of the totems for the tauren, so I'm enjoying it so far. Now, Conclave of Wind here is an interesting little fight. It really proves that Blizzard has fallen in love with the multiple encounters of having more than one boss in a single encounter, rather. Uh, Pretty much everything in Bastion of Twilight up till Cho'Gall is a multiple encounter, and here we have the three wind elementals before you try and take on Alakir. And this encounter really fits into the category of one of those encounters that seems rather daunting and very confusing when you start out, but once you down them for the first time, uh, everything just falls in place after that, because the fight itself seems rather complicated because you have three different platforms, each with their own boss, and each boss has abilities, and during the fight you have to switch platforms and DPS different bosses, so it's rather confusing to learn at first, but once you're actually in here and you do the encounter, you realize it's not all that confusing. I'm one of the DPS that is switching between platforms 1 and 2, meaning you'll see me switch between the Earth Elemental here and then the Ice Elemental when his special attack goes off. And thankfully I am in this group because if I was one of the DPS on the third platform, you would basically just see me shooting a stationary boss for video, and oh, how interesting that sounds. But luckily I'm here, so you get to see a little movement on the boss's behalf, and you get to see some switching of targets between the boss and some ads and some platform jumping. So it's actually a rather interesting little encounter to watch. And talking about my character for a little bit, I mentioned in the Valiona video that I was not only going to go through a race change, but a name change as well, because being decaffeinated, the name was obviously a tauren pun. And I figured when I switched to Goblin, the pun wouldn't make sense anymore, so I went for a name change and changed him to Ryson. Well, apparently my guild didn't enjoy it so much because apparently they had become attached to the name Decaffeinated. So I decided to just reshorten it back to decaf and kind of keep the pun that I used to be a cow and no longer am. So lo and behold, the pun still works. And what you just saw there was the first switch over to the ice platform to DPS that boss for a little bit during his special, and now we head back to our previous boss. And that single instance is basically the duration of the fight, just repeated a few times, where we DPS this boss until the Ice one hits his special attack, then all the DPS head over to that platform, hit him. Once his special attack is over, we head back to our original platforms and DPS our individual bosses. And the one gimmick, I don't know if it should really be called a gimmick or not, is all of the bosses have to die within 1 minute of the first one's death. So ideally, the two side platforms, you're trying to equalize the DPS between the two, so the outer two die at hopefully the same time, so all the DPS can converge on the middle one and kill the ice boss within 60 seconds of the outer one's dying. So it's it's nice to have that coordination needed, because not a whole lot of fights that we've been in so far have needed that. There's always coordination needed from dodging attacks and tanking position, but we haven't really seen a fight where the DPS have needed to coordinate two different enemies like that yet. So it's a rather nice change that adds an interesting factor in there, because in all honesty, if you have a boss that's just tank and spank, you really don't feel any enjoyment when you kill it, because there's no challenge there. It's the challenge of the individual bosses that makes these things interesting to kill, and it makes the loot that much more rewarding that you had to work for a few days to kill these things. Which is kind of the seat of one of the big reasons I was disappointed when Blizzard made the decision to allow people to buy tiered gear with the highest level of points at the time, because up until Wrath of the Lich King, the tiered gear was always really a prestige item because it meant that you had gone into these raids and downed the hardest bosses that they had to offer. And now in Cataclysm, 3 out of the 5 of the tier 11 pieces are purchased with Valor points. Now, even though the raiders will gain access to those pieces faster than someone who's just doing daily heroics will, it still takes a little bit of the enjoyment and the cool factor and the prestige out of having the tiered gear when when someone who hasn't even touched a raid can be sitting on, at bare minimum, his 2-piece bonus out of the set. But, I mean, it adds enjoyment for everyone who's playing the game, I guess. But, I mean, there's still plenty of items in raids that non-raiders will never get their hands on, so there's still some exclusivity there. And as you can see, we're now converging for the final time on the ice boss to blow him up before the 60-second timer hits, because if you don't make the timer and all 3 bosses don't go down within 60 seconds, then they respawn with full health, and it's basically a wipe because your raid will not have the ability to do this encounter twice in a row, because it is, as every other raid encounter, very mana intensive on the healers. So, and we were pushing our luck right here as you see the final one fall. Yay! And there goes another raid boss kill by Pandemic. And 1 out of the 2 bosses in Throne of the Four Winds is dead. See you around for our next kill.